Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Geeks from the Multiverse. I am one of your hosts, Matt. With me is John, and we're going to have a very exciting episode for you today. And we're going to be talking about practical effects versus digital effects. And we're going to be kind of outlining some of the practical effects that have been used in movies and TV shows, dating back from the 20s all the way up to today, talking about some digital effects and even having like a little bit of a spirited debate on which one is potentially better than the other. So let's get geeky. John, we got ourselves a doozy of a starting topic here, huh?
I don't want to even go further than that right now, but I mean, I know Matt's going to talk about this disclaimer, but I will say this, boys and girls, whoever is going to be listening to this beginning topic, just be fair warned that it's one of those things that, we've talked about, in a private conversation, that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, it's unfortunately, it's the sad truth that we've been noticing. And I mean, I'm going to let Matt kind of go further with it.
Yeah. I mean, so before we kind of start this topic, like, I do want to say that as far as John and I go, none of what we're going to be talking about, which is quite controversial as far as like, the topic itself, it doesn't come from a place of hate or some kind of an ism, whether it be, sexism, genderism, racism, whatever. Like, it doesn't come from a place like that. So as we're kind of discussing this, just have that in mind. Like, we're not saying like we don't want, a certain gender being only shown in Marvel or Star Wars or whatever. We're just kind of bringing it up as like a point of discussion. So I guess let's just get into it, John,
Yeah, let's do it. So, when it comes down to Marvel, well, I mean, I guess really Marvel, DC, and Star Wars. I mean, we've been noticing more and more when it comes to how male leads have been kind of pushed to the wayside and more female leads have been, kind of been bringing up and, being the center of attention. So, we're going to use this term fridging. Okay.
Yes.
So I'm going to let Matt explain this part though.
So this is a term that is used. It's used in books, mainly used in movies and TV, and it's known as women in refrigerator syndrome, which sounds really weird. And there's no actual women.
Extremely weird, but yeah.
There's no actual women in refrigerators, but that's just what it's called. It's a literary trope it's prevalent in comic books and other kind of sci-fi media where a woman is injured or sexual assaulted or killed, or if not all three,
unfortunately,
in order to move a male character's story arc forward.
So the problem is like you see now in Marvel, especially because that's kind of our main, I would say, focus. I mean, of course, we're going to talk about maybe like Star Wars and of course DC, but really Marvel has been doing this more and more. So when it comes down to, let's say, Hawkeye. Okay, so Hawkeye was a prime example where, they showed him in a TV show, and then all of a sudden you see this female lead, Kate Bishop, kind of take over, his role and basically like replaces, again, being Hawkeye, but in her version of it, right? And so then you have, She-Hulk, right? Just recently being kind of like female lead role of being Hulk. And so, you see these characters like it. We're not saying that we don't want to see, I guess, female leads in doing that. I think the problem that we really have is
they're replacing male.
Right. They're replacing leads. The whole male leads and not having the, that same kind of concept that they had in phase 1 through 3 when it comes to, let's say, Marvel, where, they brought in, from the comics, they brought in a good story arc and they brought in the good concepts with everybody. And they really focused on, developing the characters and doing that, basing it off the comics and really developing that team. And then you saw how, Endgame played out at the very end. Like, right. It was dramatic. It was great. It was a reason why, because they brought everybody in. But I think the problem that we have is like when it came to the female leads, they just kind of, take over, and then they're trying to.
They're pushing so much content out that a lot of these female leads that we're seeing, we've only seen once, or they weren't a main character in the content, the thing that they were in.
Right.
Like America Chavez.
Right.
Was not the main character, and we only saw her in parts of the movie.
Right. And so it's not like when you see Captain America, like let's say in the first 3 phases where, he's already had 3 movies, like during that time, like we talked about, like with Iron Man being in 3 movies, and then even Thor already having 3 movies. Unfortunately, Hulk didn't have his, rise to fame in there, but
he had 2 movies with 2 different people and 2 different stories.
Well, technically, if you're looking at the MCU, the only movie that was supposed to be in there was only the Incredible Hulk, not the original Eric Bana one. But, that's the problem though, is like, like that, it became the pinnacle point to, for the Avengers, and then moving forward and doing all that. But like the issue is now, like what Matt was saying, is like, all these female characters have been in like certain TV shows, certain movies, and that's it. Like we only get to see them once. It's not like they're actually creating that story arc to build like they've been doing already in the first 3, phases.
Yeah. And the first 3 phases, you have to kind of look at what they did. So, you initially have an Iron Man, and then you have a Thor, and then you have another Iron Man, and then you have a Captain America. They didn't have TV shows when they did phase 1 through 3. Right. But what you see in those phases is you have Iron Man, and then you have Thor. You have a second Iron Man, and there's a few projects in between of those, but you have Captain America, and then you have the Avengers. And not only do you see Iron Man in 2 different movies, but you see him in Avengers as well.
Right. And so another thing we want to kind of bring up is the whole, you basically, in this case, like we've just said, like removing male characters and then, replacing them with, certain characters that might be, in this case, like when we talk about our society, right? So we're talking about how, there needs to be lesbians, there's gays, there's transgenders, there's, whatever the case is. And they need to make it more of a forefront, or they needed to make it more diversified.
You have less white people, John. What less white people?
No, like listen. Like the problem is, and this is why I said this is going to be a very
male can be titled in the subject line, John.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
No
Anyways, no, the point I guess I'm trying to make it is that I'm not saying I don't want to see diversified, females in whatever it may be, because I guess the real thing is like.
It's called equity, which I think I defined somewhere in this.
I mean, I hate saying it like this, but like, you look at Endgame and how well it did. And one of the, honestly, when you look at Endgame and how they brought all the characters, and especially that female scene, like you saw all the female leads in that sense. Like, I mean, granted, yes, I guess in the movie they were supporting characters, but I will say that they did a really good job of bringing them all in, and they were, they had a badass moment in that, even those few scenes. But I mean, what I'm saying is that it doesn't need to be that you need to basically kill all the men and have a female driven kind of thing. Because if you go back to the comics, like Matt was just saying, like, yes, technically they were white. Okay. Plain and simple. It was what it was. I'm not trying to be, racist. I'm not trying to be anything like that. But what I'm trying to say is that if you're trying to stick to storybook, if you're trying to stay true to the actual, what was actually written, right? I'm not saying you can't change certain things, but if you want the same kind of concepts that you had before, then stick with it. It does not need to be changed all the way.
Like I said, it's the idea of equity. And I did find that the true, I mean, one of the definitions of equity, it's not like it is a banking term. Like if you have a lot of equity, but one of the definitions is treated fair and impartial. And that's what I think when we're fans of Marvel and DC and Star Wars, we want there to be equity among the storyline in itself, and having female leads, having male leads, having white, black, Asian, Pakistan, like whoever, it doesn't matter as long as it's fair and impartial for everybody. Right. And that's not what's occurring.
No. And the biggest thing is like, so you look at a lot of the modern comics that are coming out, right? So a lot of it is definitely going to be more, diversified and more, I'm going to say it less white and more diversified when it comes to different cultures and different, races, whatever the case is. I get that. I understand that. But at the end of the day, when you look back at the true concepts of how comics were made and this and that, I'm not saying we have to have, straight up white people playing white characters and doing all this stuff. What I'm saying is like, look at how, Falcon, right, was one of the very first black superheroes. You got Black Panther. You have all these other black superheroes, right? You had them in the comic books even back in the day. So there's no reason, because I will say this, right? I guarantee you, if we said Black Panther was white, I guarantee you there'd be an uproar.
Oh, there definitely
guarantee you
would be.
there'd be an uproar, right? So that's what I'm saying. So why are we changing how characters are made in that sense? And I'm going to say this, guys. I'm sorry, but if a character was made, let's say, like I said, Black Panther, Falcon, if we said, hey, we're going to make them white, we're going to make them
it would be
Asian
the
or
greatest
whatever.
outrage. And I can tell you, if they made Falcon or, Black Panther
white
or
Asian or any other thing,
there would be a huge uproar, a boycott. Like, and if you look at what Marvel is doing now, that's happening.
That's exactly what's happening.
The Marvels right now is projected to make less money than the Flash,
which is surprising because I would have thought.
I don't see that happen. I mean, I do see people going out to see it, but right now the projections of the Marvels is that it's going to make less money than the Flash, and the Flash did not make a whole lot of money.
Right, and we've already talked about how we felt about like that movie itself. I mean, we can talk about DC for days, but the I guess what we're trying to say is in this moment is that when you look at how diversified our culture is, I'm not saying we've been saying this from the beginning. We're not saying we don't want to see female leads that are different in, racial backgrounds or cultural backgrounds or whatever the case is. What we want to see is that if there's a character that needs to be in there, make them portrayed as what it was originally intended to, instead of basically saying, you know what, Captain America is going to be black. He's going to be this. He's going to be that. Now, granted, I understand, like in the comics, Falcon does take over as Cap. I'm not saying that, and that's fine.
And I have news for everybody. If you do read the comic books, Falcon wasn't a great Captain America, by the way.
But really, what we're trying to say is like, when we look at how
everybody should be included. It shouldn't just be like we're going to just flat out replace Iron Man with a black version, or
an Asian or whatever.
That sounds really terrible, but how cool would it have been to have Tony Stark's Iron Man and Ironheart in this, whether it's a TV show or a movie, like Tony playing that mentor role to Riri Williams, being, you get to see that development happen, and you get to see, Tony kind of step in a different role other than being, his usual sarcastic self. I think that would have been really awesome. But he died. So we'll never actually see that unless they choose to use like an AI and they bring him in for, voice recordings.
Or I was going to say a flashback, depending on what it is exactly. Right. So, you know what? It is a good question in general. What if, or let's say if the character and or story is good, does it truly matter if the character is male or female or other ethnicity?
To me, no. I mean, for me, when maybe it's different for others and maybe for you, but for me, like when I'm watching a Marvel movie or a DC movie or a Star Wars movie, the last thing that I'm thinking about is this guy would be so much better if he was Italian. Or,
I mean, you got a point there. I mean, yeah.
If this character was a lesbian, it would make the story a whole lot. That's like the last thing I'm thinking about. My geek brain goes to places like, how does the character match up to the comic book? How, is it off? Is it right? Like, how well are they doing it? I want to see superpowers. That's where my brain goes. It's like a little kid. You know what I mean? Like, I want to see superpowers. What does he do? I'm not thinking about all this crap, John.
No, I agree, man. I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, I don't care whether you're white, black, Asian, fucking the rainbow for all I give a shit about. I mean, honestly, as long as you as a character. So let's say, like, for example, I know we talked about Ahsoka, but like, okay, if we want to talk about that for a second, technically, right, Rosario Dawson, I'm pretty sure she's black. Could be Hispanic. I'm not entirely sure. I'm not trying to judge. I'm not trying to do that. But what I am saying is that, she is of color. Doesn't matter what it is. But, she does a really good job, in my opinion. Granted, I know we've already had this conversation. Like, she does a good job of Ahsoka, but that's just me. But like, what I'm saying is like if I said, Charlize, or what was it? Is it Charlize Theron? Charlize Theron. Like, I said, you know what? No, I think she's going to do a better Ahsoka or something like that. I'm not like, okay, she's white. She's also South African. So what? You know what I'm saying? Like, but
she probably could pull it off.
Of course you would, because you're already you already have some feelings about her. But anyways, no. But what I'm saying is like, it doesn't matter, right? I think when it comes down to if a person can get as close to likeness as that character can be, then that's fine. Because like we've talked about other characters in the past where you look at like, I'm going to say this, it's kind of random, but like Tom Hardy being Bane. In that movie, right? I mean, granted, he was, granted, he had a full set of hair, but he had like a bald cap, whatever. But they made it look like he was actually him. Now, imagine if, like, let's say
Jim Carrey
or Elijah, or I don't know, Morgan Freeman or somebody like that.
That'd be awful,
right? If you throw somebody random into that spot, and you're like, wait a minute, that's a little weird to like throw that character in, right? So. It doesn't, and I agree with you. I don't think it really matters whether that needed to be Italian, Irish, Polish, Scottish, English, whatever the case is, right? It doesn't matter. Like, at the end of the day,
if the story's good and the character's well developed, it will make the story good.
Right.
But like what they're doing now is like I said, there's so many Marvel projects that like when Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania came out, that was actually rushed to be released earlier than what it was supposed to. So the visual effects artists that worked on the show, or the movie rather, did not actually finish the CGI. So when you watch the movie and the CGI is kind of blurry, there's a reason for that. It's because they rushed up the timeline on it and they didn't finish it. And that's a problem when you have too many projects. Phases 1 through 3 were arguably the best in the MCU so far. And the only reason for that is how many different times you saw the same characters. That's how Iron Man, Robert Downey Jr. and Chris Evans, Captain America became more of a household name. Before Iron Man came out, nobody talked about Iron Man. I mean, Captain America has always been popular, but
so that's the thing.
You certainly wouldn't have had a computer chair with Captain America on it before.
Well, I mean,
one.
Okay, well, hold on. Let's get this straight. I mean, technically, if Blade didn't actually do so well back in the early 2000s, then really we wouldn't have a Marvel as it is now.
But nobody talks about Blade either before that.
No, I understand that. So, like, when you look at how Marvel has developed its characters and how they've transpired and, basically have given this big old concept of how Marvel has done so well in basically, and their characters. I mean, you look at DC. I mean, I'm not going to go there, but like,
yeah, they're a mess.
They're just a mess. But like, yeah, if they started, let's say, for example, let's say they said, you know what, they did. They technically made a Batwoman TV show. It did terrible. There's a reason why it did terrible. But I mean, that's why if you look at DC's example, don't follow DC. There's a reason why they didn't do so well.
And I do applaud Marvel for in its attempts to be, more diversified with its characters and trying to reach, new fans of Marvel, but you're doing it at the expense of other characters. Like, unless they do flashbacks or, kind of resurrect, if you will, Captain America and Iron Man, you're not going to see them in a new movie. You're just not. And the problem that we have now is all these characters that we've already seen, there's so far like really only one character that has been in a show and a movie in Phase 4 and 5, and that's Kamala Khan.
Right, and that's the only one that has been at least consistent. But actually, that's not true, because was it Photon, whatever the Monica Rambeau, whatever her name is. Basically,
yeah, I mean,
but again, she was also in WandaVision technically, but like she was also in that too, and then. That was really it. I would say those two characters really.
Yeah, and we didn't really. I mean, you kind of learned a little bit about her, but she didn't really get her abilities until almost the end of the show.
Right after the show. But the point is now she's going to be in the show with Kamala Khan, and then now Carol Danvers. But
there isn't a whole lot of characters, and that's the problem. Is like, who takes up the mantle that Captain America and Iron Man leave behind? Is it Thor? It certainly isn't Ant-Man.
Well, technically, it's not really Falcon right now either because he hasn't really done anything besides that one TV show.
Right, and he's supposed to be Captain America, so you've had all these things. Where is he?
Right, and so that's why with Phase...
I mean, imagine, John, when Iron Man came out in 2008.
2008, yep.
Imagine only seeing Iron Man that one time, and then 2012 is when you see him again.
Oh, I would have been rip shit. I mean, I probably would have been like, what the fuck am I watching right now? And yes, I swore. But I'm just saying it's the truth because I'd be like, well, why? What is the point in where's this character for development? Because that would have been the same thing if like, Justice League, right? So they brought in all these goddamn characters and guess what? None of it made sense.
You got about 15 minutes of character development, and then we're supposed to just accept that they're all fighting crime. They're all fighting the bad guy together.
Yeah, but that's the whole point. But that's what I'm saying. It's like there's no character development. There's no, there's no intrigueness into the, the actual story arc and how they've developed and what really Marvel really is. And that's why, when you look at how they did Phase 1 and through 3, it's like it's great. But then when you started adding in like 4 and 5 and now going to potentially 6,
it's pretty much directly after Endgame, which correlates to exactly when, Disney took over before Endgame came out.
Disney technically came over. Well, wait, we're talking about Marvel though, right?
Yeah. Disney came in before Endgame came out. So they didn't have a chance to really change that direction. But everything after Endgame was where they shifted.
Well, no, they owned Marvel since even before 2008 though, technically.
Well, you know what I mean? But
no, I know
a lot of those projects were already done before they really could get into development of
TV
what
shows.
Phase 5 was going to be and 4.
I think they, for the most part, with Phase 1 and 3, if they added a TV show to it, I think it would have been like, what the fuck are they doing? I mean, that's the truth because I don't honestly
only if the TV show that they're adding correlates to the characters that were in those projects, and I think if Marvel's really going to continue forward, they need to stop doing all these random shows like Moon Knight. Now,
Moon Knight's probably not going to ever happen again, to be honest.
I think it was a fine show.
Absolutely.
It didn't explain shit.
It was probably one of the most randomest shows that Marvel could have created, but yes.
And so you go, well, is it going to be in anything else? Nope. Okay, well, what was the point of that then? What was the vehicle that they used for that?
I mean, like, and you and I have talked about this, but like even the, what is that? I'm trying to think of what it is. It's like with Blade and like Black Knight and all them, like we were talking about the Midnight Suns.
Yeah.
Right. So like potentially it could have been something like that. But like other than that, there is no development in.
They would have been better off doing a show that was based on Thor or even, yes, they have Loki that just finished literally like yesterday.
Oh, I actually have to catch up on that, but yes.
But other than like Loki, like they should be focusing on shows like with America Chavez, doing another one with Kamala Khan, even though she's in this movie now, but we have character like Kate Bishop that they should do a show with just Kate Bishop.
Wait, America Chavez is in the Miss Marvel's movie?
No, we've only seen her in one thing though.
No. Right. I just
having Moon Knight be like maybe a show that's based on her instead of doing Moon Knight, who honestly nobody really cares about unless Midnight Suns actually is a thing.
Right, and that's going to be something that's going to be later on. But I agree. So like when you look at how the conceptualized of really 4, 5, and 6 when it comes to phases. I mean, right now we're still in Phase 5. We're not even in Phase 6 yet. I mean, it's sad that really you look at 4. There's some good movies, and I mean the worst movie of all is The Eternals. But I mean that's a whole nother topic for another day. But like when you look at how they conceptualize the whole idea of like, okay, we're gonna really focus on female leads in this case, like we've been talking about.
We want to be more diversified in there.
Like I said, like now, granted, like you look at Shang-Chi and you look at how they did that so well, like it's great, but it's not. I mean, granted, I would say out of the Phase 4, like it's one of the best movies for sure. But you look at, in this case, like Miss Marvel's, technically it came out, if I'm not mistaken, did it come out today?
I believe it came out today.
So yeah, November 10th. Just remember that. But so yes, so it came out today. And I mean, like we've been saying, like it's it's one of those movies that like we said, like it's not going to do as well because I hate saying it. Once you start, only focusing on, diversifying, each character, and having, all three of them be in the same movie, like, I don't know, like
there's a place for it. And I will say that there is a place for diversity, but not at the expense of replacing I've said this throughout this whole thing, like it should be about equity and including. Like if you have to take a character, like we want to introduce this character, this Blade project that they're doing with,
I forgot about it. Yep.
Mahershala Ali, they've already gotten rid of the original scriptwriter. The one that they brought in made Blade the fourth protagonist behind three women. And this is a Blade movie. How is he the fourth?
Right, and so that's the thing. That's a prime example. It's like, okay, so
and he almost left. Like the thing is, he almost left the entire project because you're doing a Blade movie, and I'm taking a backseat to three other people.
Matt, I'm just going to say it. Chat GPT. I think that's what needs to happen. I think they just need to hire the AI to be doing these movies.
Honestly, I do think AI might be able to write better stories. But anyways, that's another topic for another day, maybe.
But I mean, when we look at how these movies are, being portrayed and whatnot. I mean, so for example, like actually another great example here, like moving forward is like X-Men. Okay. So like what Sony, or sorry, not Sony, Disney, acquiring Fox. Yes. So they're acquiring Fox, and this will be another topic for a different day, of course. They've been wanting to do something with X-Men for a long time, especially with Fantastic Four and how they can, introduce them into the universe. And so, when you start looking at now, we'll say, I actually don't really know who the main villain is now because we already talked about how, King the Conqueror is going to be non-existent now. But I mean,
not gonna spoil Loki, but in 2 episodes from now, we'll be doing a Loki episode. But
no, of course. But what I'm saying, I'm talking about the actor that was playing King the Conqueror is what I'm saying.
Yeah, and depending on how his court stuff goes, is I guess what they're kind of waiting on. But I mean, with X-Men, it's like, what are you guys waiting for?
Right. There's no reason to do it. So Matt and I talked about this. I'm like, I'm really hoping that if they're going to introduce
X-23,
yeah, I don't want that, and I'm going to say that, and the reason why I say this is because if you're trying to introduce a team just like Fantastic Four, there is no reason why you need to be having X-23, because it doesn't make any sense, because that was not part of the original comic book. So like if you're going to have Wolverine, Storm, Cyclops, Jean Grey, Beast, like all these characters come into play, there was no goddamn reason to throw in a female, Wolverine in this case, because that's basically what she turns into. It's like you can have that later. I'm talking later on. Like that is like a later story. And so like if you had Reed Richards, okay, if he becomes a female, I'm not gonna lie, I'd be a little pissed, because it doesn't make any sense, because you have Reed Richards, you have Susan Storm, who's Invisible Woman, you have the Human Torch, right? So you have Johnny Storm.
But John, wouldn't it make sense if Mr. Fantastic was a Mrs. Fantastic? Because him and Susan Storm are in a relationship.
No, no, because and then you got the Thing, for God's sakes. I mean, what if he was a female, non-binary? I'm just saying, like,
choose your crowd. 3 is fun, man.
What I'm saying is, it doesn't make any sense. So, like, when you start,
it doesn't make any sense.
If you start introducing these characters, especially as teams, now you're just screwing up the whole story. You're not actually continuing to build upon that concept.
And the one character that I'd be okay with being, I mean, I know the newer Fantastic Four, not the original ones, but the newer one that they made was horrible.
Oh, you mean was it Michael B. Jordan at the time?
I actually didn't mind him being a black character. Like, I think Johnny Storm could be the same in a new Fantastic Four movie.
I mean, so, but keep in mind, I mean, technically, if you think about it now, King the Conqueror is black. Okay. Now, granted, in the comic books, he wasn't black.
No, he wasn't.
Actually, he was blue. But I mean, I'm not gonna go there. Actually,
I mean, a lot of the Eternals weren't also female either. They were also male in the comic book.
True. But what I'm saying is that
Ajax was I actually have the list of them right.
Oh, did you? Well, we'll talk about that in a second.
Yeah.
But like, you look at, King the Conqueror, technically, he wasn't black. He actually was a descendant from Reed Richards. He was, I think he was like the great grandson or whatever. But the point is like he was actually white. He was not black, and he actually was blue in the comics, technically, once he was,
Right.
King the Conqueror. But my point is now they were looking at, Reed Richards as being black, at some point. That's what they were trying to do. I don't know if that's what they want to do. I mean, so.
And it'd be okay
because
as long
now
as they're not changing like the whole character arc of who Reed Richards is.
Yes, I agree.
If it changes that, then this character is not Reed Richards. He is a completely new character that, Disney Marvel has created.
So, like, for example, I'm just going to say this, right? So, like, and this is where it kind of drives me a little insane. Like, I would have loved to seen John Krasinski and Emily Blunt be, Mr. Fantastic and Invisible Woman. I honestly would have loved to seen that. I really would have loved to seen that. Now, I can understand, like, when we look at, like, King the Conqueror, him being black, it's kind of weird. But I mean, that could, I don't even think that would have really mattered, only because maybe his descendants, there was somebody that, they married black and then it could have changed, whatever. So really, I guess, in my opinion, that wouldn't have mattered. But if you look back, if they decided to do John Krasinski, Emily Blunt, I don't know exactly who they would have chose for like the Thing and, Johnny Storm, whatever. I think they could have, done those two characters, and then they could have honestly chosen, someone, I would say someone similar to Chris Evans, that, when he did like the Human Torch originally, and then the Thing, I mean, you just have to think of someone who's really,
I mean, the Thing could be literally anybody, but
I mean, that's true. But I would say
Yeah.
you'd want somebody who's like really, bodybuilder kind of type and, kind of muscular in that sense. What if The Rock? No, I'm kidding. No. No, I'm kidding. No, let's not.
I mean,
I'm kidding. No.
don't get me wrong. I do love Dwayne Johnson.
I understand. No. But I understand. I don't think that would. Yeah,
In certain movies, not good.
I mean,
Not good.
you know what's funny? I mean, now you think about it. I mean, he went from DC to. I mean, that would be his way to
And
Marvel.
I do think his character as Black Adam was pretty good.
Oh, I agree so too. But that's not what we're talking about
No.
here. But
Anyway, we should move on to the main.
well, no. I thought you were talking about the Eternals now. I thought you wanted to mention that real quick.
No, I actually deleted that from my notes.
Of course you did.
But it was Mercari and Ajax were originally male in the comic books.
I thought Ajax was. Oh no, you're right.
They were originally male and they made him female. Again.
Well, hold on. I mean, technically, if you look at Doctor Strange, I mean, the ancient one was technically a male.
That was the same thing. The ancient one was a male and made female. But again, it works.
Right.
As long as it doesn't change the narrative of the character,
The story, yeah.
It wasn't like, the ancient one or even, in Eternals, as horrible as that movie is.
I mean, that's true.
Like it wasn't like they went and changed, although I think Eternals actually did a little bit with some of the characters, because I think at least one of them was gay, which
it's fine. Whatever. It's what it is.
It is what it is, but why does that matter for a movie that's called Eternals?
I mean,
that's what that's the filter I use. Like, why does it matter if this character is gay? As long as he's doing what he's supposed to be doing as a character, I could care less whether he was, gay or whatever.
I mean, well, and I'm only going to say it like this too. I mean, because, technically in Doctor Strange, when you see America Chavez's parents, they're both lesbians. Okay.
Right.
Now, I mean, again, as a viewer, when I'm watching this movie, do I care? Not really. But I'm just saying in general, like it when you start to like push it to the forefront,
right? It's the pushing that envelope, and again, like seeing her parents, her two moms. You have to, I always ask myself, like, what does this add to the overall story? And yeah, seeing the parents is one thing, but what does that one scene
have to add to the story?
Add to what's going on in Doctor Strange? I don't think it really adds very much, other than, some people might get that emotional connection because they have two moms, and I totally understand that. But in the narrative of what was going on in Doctor Strange, like, that should maybe be a deleted scene. because like it doesn't move the narrative anywhere.
I think really the moral of the story is when it comes down to, what we've been talking about, whether or not you have, female driven, leads in this case, or in this case, having these concepts of like, it needs to be, of different color or different cultures or whatever the case is when it comes to these stories. If they have a purpose, go for it. If they don't, it doesn't matter, because honestly, at the end of the day, like when we look at our culture, there's no reason to be, I hate saying it, but when you go to like Target or Walmart and they start shoving down, hey, it's, all the non-binary, lesbian, LGBTQIA, all this other stuff. That's great. You know what? Celebrate it. I'm not saying to not do that, but when you start pushing it down people's, I hate saying it, but throats, it doesn't, like, that's great. You want to celebrate, you want to do whatever, that's fine. But we, as a culture, we don't need to be pushed, into that direction.
Yeah.
And we don't need to have it down our throats because, again, celebrate it. As a whole, I would say we probably don't care. We want you to do whatever makes you feel happy and whatever makes you feel good about yourselves and everything else. And so, like, when you look at these movies,
we just don't want to hear it every single movie and every single character has to have this. No,
it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. And it's one of those things like everybody should be included. Correct. And it should not just be, well, we need to have, right now, I think phase 4 was like, I think somebody did numbers on this. I think it was like 55% male and 40 something percent females that were portrayed in the overall projects in phase 4. Oh, and it's like, if you're like the Disney exec or the Marvel exec, you're kind of like, well, I think we can push that female number up to 60% and move the male one down a little bit more. No, it probably should be 50-50.
And like, I think what Matt and I were really trying to say, hopefully to be done with this conversation, is at the end of the day, whether it's male, female, non-binary, transgender, lesbian, gay, straight, whatever the case is, right? It does not matter. And when we talk about equality or really equity, and we're talking about equal on both sides, right? Yeah. When we look at how, Marvel has done, how Star Wars has done, how, DC has done, it doesn't matter how you portray each character, as long as it makes sense in the story, as long as the male and female ratio, sure, if you want to make it 50-50, then go for it. But at the end of the day, when you look at comic books, when you look at how the story should have been told in, like, let's say books, especially with Star Wars and stuff like that, make it as equal and as fair as you can get, because at the end of the day, as long as it makes sense, there's no reason to start changing how the characters need to be portrayed.
Right. And on some level, you just have to take your own personal bias out of the equation and kind of be open-minded, which, is hard for a lot of people. But
I mean, we do live in a society that, is what it is.
And, you just have to be more open-minded to, yes, there's going to be white male characters. I'm sorry. There's just going to be.
And just like there's going to be
black, there's going to be Pakistani, Italian, there's going to be male, there's going to be female, there will be non-binary,
Shit, I mean, if that's the case, there's going to be fat, there's going to be, tall, small, freaking, overweight. I mean, you can name all kinds of things.
Furries everywhere.
I mean, just say it. Like, there's going to be all kinds of different things. So really, at this point, who cares?
Who cares, right? It's about the characters. It's about Marvel. It's about the stories. It should not be about all this society crap.
Ready? Who cares about the bullshit? Ready? I'm just going to say it as it is. Who cares about the bullshit? And guess what? We all should just come, sing together and we say, Kumbaya, my Lord, Kumbaya. I'm just kidding. No, but my point is we all come together as a whole and we say, you know what? Let's do this together, because you know what? I'm sick and tired of this crap. Now we need to move on.
Yes. All right. I'm going to talk a little bit about some practical effects, John, because I really dig practical effects.
I feel like this is like your department, because like the way I look at it is like when you start looking at our, editing software and stuff like that. So like, I'm going to say this guy. So, Matt's more of the behind the scene guy, when it comes down to like, editing our, our episodes and, looking at our photos and stuff like that. He does a lot of the behind the scenes work. So like, again, so like right now he's wearing our jersey, which we'll actually talk about in our next episode, but he's done a lot of that, right? So he's more the behind the scenes guy. I'm more the, I would say promoter, right? So I would say like, I'm the guy that's like, hey, let me sell you this product, basically. Like I'm telling you this actual, podcast. And so, this is why I'm glad that he's finally like, you know what, I'm going to talk about this stuff because you kind of get to see how, I guess, his brain works in some ways. I mean, granted, it's a little different with movies because this is really what we're talking about is like movies and TV shows, but
Right.
it allows you to kind of see how he kind of thinks when it comes to like developing, new ideas with like photos and like, let's say different, videos. So like if you look on YouTube, I guarantee you're going to find like, some of that interesting, like transitional, like ideas that he has with like the YouTube videos itself. I mean, granted, we're just talking, but like, I'm not gonna lie. I mean, I wish I could, do half the stuff that he does, but I can't. I mean, and hopefully one day he'll teach me, but that's just, that's between him and I, but anyways, go ahead. We'll talk about practical effects.
Yeah. So practical effects, the very first one I wanted to talk about, and I think this one's probably the more interesting one to me. Especially, cause now they use digital effects to do a lot of this. They don't do a lot of these matte paintings anymore. And if you're asking yourself, well, what the heck is a matte painting? And it's MATTE painting. It's a painted landscape or set or from a, it could be a distant location. It could be, a hole in the ground. It could be pretty much anything.
I mean, the way I look at it is like when I'm looking at this, it's more like, when you look at like theater, like your like high school plays or something like that,
The background.
they have like that background and it's all painted. Like that's that same effect. I mean, so like if you think of matte paintings, it's like, you look back at like the 60s, or like earlier on where they basically had to like, or your old Westerns, right? So like something like it's just a constant, like same theme that's just like going along and it looks stupid, but it's the same thing over and over and over again. So like
these were like literally paintings that people painted, hand painted.
Right.
And they would kind of exclude the areas of where like maybe set pieces were and where the actual actor was in the scene.
Right.
And this matte painting is not on location. So it's not like the actors are looking at it and they know, or the director's looking at it. This was a painted image and they used, compositing to actually put it in place where it would overlap with the video. And you would get the matte painting with the piece that they wanted selected out. And you would see the character, in that scene. And one of the, I think one of the most iconic that is on this list is the final scene in Raiders of the Lost Ark, where you have this kind of big warehouse. And you see, it's kind of like if you walked into like a BJ's or a Sam's Club,
I love how you use that as a reference, but yeah, no,
you see the shelves and the box and the wooden boxes, like, and you just see kind of Indiana Jones carting the ark, into a shelf area.
Yeah.
The only part of that scene that's real is that one hallway where Indiana Jones is walking up. That whole entire scene is a matte painting.
I never would have known that, to be honest.
Another one is when they show the Death Star.
I figured you would pick that one, but yeah.
And basically the hole where the laser is actually shooting through it.
Yep.
That hole is a matte painting. Just the hole itself. Everything else is scenery. I
mean, you're going to talk about the next one, like miniature effect. I mean, that's kind of like that same thing though, where you make it kind of seem like it's, in a bigger scale, but it's more like in that sense.
Yeah. The matte painting basically made that hole, because the hole was not a hole. It was just kind of a section missing from that set.
Right, but that's what I'm saying.
The matte painting made it an actual hole that was all. It looked like it had depth.
Right. I mean, like when you look at movies like that, I would say pretty much from like, I would say depending on the movie, but like 80s and, well, of course, long time ago.
Yeah.
You know, they made it look like it was something that was.
Mary Poppins is a big one too.
Oh, don't get me started on that one. That's all animated. But anyways, go ahead.
Well, no, I mean in Mary Poppins, when Mary Poppins is gliding over London with her umbrella, the St. Paul's Cathedral, the London rooftops, like all the aerial views, guess what? Those are all matte paintings. They're not in the actual movie of her floating down like that.
I mean,
Wizard of Oz, when they're getting out of the poppy field, and
of course.
and you see, you know, the Emerald City, and you know they're kind of moving on again. That again is a matte painting.
I mean, the problem is like I said, like you look at a lot of Westerns, or even if you look at like some movies where, and it's pretty obvious, but like you look at like how, like let's say someone's driving, right, and they have this like thing in the background. And I mean, now granted, it might be a film like in the background, but it in a sense that's kind of like a matte painting, where it's just like it's a continuous thing,
right? Where
it's like that's all you see, you know. But that's where I see where, you know, looking at, you know, 80s and before, you know, like that's really all they had. They didn't have a whole lot of technology to be able to make it look like CG.
And I think it's amazing that they were hand painted. Like that to me is an amazing thing. Like when you can make something like that, like look 100% real. And if you watch Indiana Jones, you would think he was in a warehouse, but he's actually not. He's just walking
around, no problem.
And the matte painting made it look like he was in this big like government, you know, secret government warehouse, and he was storing the Ark in this place.
I mean, so I will say this. I mean, like I understand we're going to talk about CGI and all that stuff too, but it's crazy how when you look at, depending on when you look at certain movies, right? So like if you look back at like the early 1900s versus let's say even the 1980s, give or take, like in that time frame, right?
Yeah.
It's crazy to see how, you know, CGI has, of course, has come a long way, but like the fact that these guys and gals, depending on who it is, they've made everything by hand and made it look so realistic that even back then it was like, oh my God, that's crazy. So like if you look at, I mean, I know it's kind of a random example since I'm looking at our buddy Hank here, but like even at Jaws, right? I mean, they're talking about animatronics that, you know, they had to make it look as realistic as possible. Yeah. Now, granted, I understand it's not a bad painting, but they had to physically make an actual Jaws that was animatronic and everything else, and that was all by hand. Now, I mean, granted, that might be something later we talk about, but like it's crazy to see how they really back then, and especially how Jaws came out in the 70s. You couldn't replicate that. I mean, you could, of course, replicate it with CGI, but you couldn't really replicate it if
not in Jaws. You couldn't with CGI.
No. But that's what I'm saying. Like, but if you were to try to do that, but let's say back in the 40s and 50s, yeah, good luck with that. You never would have been able to do that.
No.
But that's the concept.
And that's crazy. I mean, that's like one of the other kind of practical effects is like the animatronics and the puppetry and the creature suits. Like Aliens, both movies, like when they came out, there was a guy in an alien suit.
Absolutely.
It wasn't like it was an animatronic. Like they actually had, you know, the really skinny dude like in an alien suit.
Yeah.
And I can only imagine how uncomfortable that thing is. Well,
I mean, like look at Chewbacca, right? From like Star Wars, and like so, or even R2D2 or C3PO, so on and so forth. So there's like
the most popular one that I could think of that is to me the most kind of impressive. Although a lot of these animatronics are really impressive, is Chucky.
Oh God!
And I know you're not a fan of it.
You already know how I feel about him. I already told you about
Chucky. Chucky is 100% the example of both puppetry and animatronics in that, like, they had so many different versions of Chucky.
Of course they did.
And they had animatronics in the head to control eyes, mouth, and eyebrows. They had animatronics in the hands, the wrist and finger movements. Arms and legs were controlled by puppetry. It took over 9 different people to animate Chucky to make him look like he was really moving. I think that's like so crazy that it takes that many people, but you have somebody that's controlling like eye movements and the mouth. You have another one that's controlling, fingers on one hand, fingers on the other. It's just crazy. And they had so many different versions of Chucky. They had one that just flailed his arms. And if you watch, Child's Play, it's like kind of the first scene where he reveals himself to Andy's mother.
So
it's just it's crazy to me that they came up with this thing.
I think when it comes down to the animatronics and everything else, I mean, it's definitely impressive in that case. But I mean, I already told you about Chucky, man. I mean,
and I know how you feel about
mean,
Chucky, but you have to admit, like the technology behind making him not look like, just a doll, but making him actually like
a killer doll, basically.
Make mouth movements and actually physically walk around. And in the house set that they had, they created a false floor so people underneath could make him walk like a real person would. Like, it's just crazy the amount of practical effects that were used back then. And it's like with making miniatures and making like full mini sets.
No, I agree. I think the thing is with me is like, when you look at CGI, right? So when you look at the fact that CGI has created so many possibilities in so many aspects, right? I mean, when you look at the fact that practical effects they may not have been impressive in that time. I mean, now granted, I mean, like you look at, how, I mean, I always like to mention Mortal Kombat here, but when you have that technology for what it is, I mean, granted, that was the best of what they could do at that time.
Right.
Right. But like when you start looking at animatronics and you start looking at how, like you were just saying, like miniature effects and, making it seem like it's realistic. So like, I always think of like, I mean, this is even earlier on, like I'm talking way before everything else. Godzilla, right? Because like, I know it sounds stupid, but like it came out so early on in movie history. So I think I can't remember when exactly it came out, but like the fact that
and that's Creature Suit with miniature.
Right. So they were
city,
using that, like that, the whole miniature thing. So like they were using a Godzilla and like they were making it like, and it would look kind of stupid because it was Japanese style, but they made it so like, like Godzilla was just like running around, through the town. But like, it was so crazy because it was like, you could see the kind of like claymation that they were using. And like, they were like, they were like showing him doing, like destroying the city and doing all that. But like, even back then, I mean, it was crazy for its time, and like now, I mean, granted now, like you can make it seem like it's real and like it's actually like, let's say in New York City or something big like that, and make it look like it's actually happening like in real time.
Yeah.
But I mean, even back then, I mean, looking at how they made it, so realistic and so how they, like I said, I think it's crazy for its time. And I think that they made it really
with what they did with Star Wars and Star Trek, like making all those miniature ships and the way that they use the camera to make it appear like it's flying through space when it's just a small model.
Right.
And I say small, but it probably one of those would fit in this room.
I mean, and the recording, absolutely. But
it's like the way that they used it made it look like the, ships were flying through space when the ships are stationary. It's the camera that's moving.
And that's the thing about like how technology has really, surprised us because like, you look back in, I would say what, 60s, 70s, maybe how, camera technology has transpired, and how they really, I mean, cameras now, I mean, God forbid how much they cost now, but like even back then, if you could find a way to like, manipulate it and actually like really create a scene where it's like, oh my God, it's so dramatic. It's there's a lot going on in this, but now, I mean, like, you talk about a camera, it's like, let's say like a movie camera, it's like 10, 20,000 or more just to get even like a really good scene and be able to do all that. But like, back then it may have only cost like a few $100s, maybe if that, depending on the budget that they had. But like, um, and even back then, I mean, if you look at like how, photography and everything else, I mean, they had to have a black room or a night, was it a black room or like a night room, or I can't remember what the correct terminology I'm thinking here, but like, they had to, dark room. Yeah. So like they had to have a dark room to be able to like, okay, I got to develop the film and everything else. So, it was hard enough to, to do that already. So, nowadays it's like, oh, okay, I could just do it digitally. No problem. I could just upload it into the iCloud.
Yeah.
But like to do all that, I mean,
and digital effects have come a long way. I mean, from going from using matte paintings to being able to, digitally create, a full full landscape scene is pretty amazing. I mean, some movies have created full cities.
Right.
And it's just crazy the amount of digital technology that exists. And yet somehow they still can't get people's mouths to move correctly.
It is crazy. So, what I think about too is like, especially with movies, is like, or not actually, sorry, not movies. I would say video games. It's kind of weird, and I always say this because it's crazy, right? Because like when you look at video games, right? So like you always see how, especially the more
they're getting better.
Ones,
they're getting better. Yeah.
But like how they would go, it's like konnichiwa, and then it's like, like they don't really match up as well as you would think. And then it's crazy because like I would say in movies, or actually what I've noticed is like it's kind of stupid, but like when you look at like streaming, right? So if like for example, if I threw on, I've been watching Psych, okay, on Peacock. So there's a lot of times where I'll watch it and it'll start saying something, and then like I've noticed that it's like a lag. And it's that same concept. It's like, it's kind of like when Godzilla, like back in the day, like way back in the day, when they would go, "Hey, how's it going?" And it would go, blah, 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 and it would just like not make any sense.
The translation, yeah,
right. And but that's what I'm saying. It's that same concept where,
well, and it's one of those things too, like with the lip movements, the lips only move up and down, but
right.
You don't see like the inflections of like when somebody says O or P or S. Like you don't see the mouth moving, like flexing in between the letters. Like you just kind of see the mouth kind of moving, and it's like,
yeah, and it's not the same, and that's why with
human movement with just simple walking, like some of the CGI and some of the earlier movies, especially like the Star Wars one where they've put Princess Leia in, or Tarkin in there, and you see him walk or you see him talking, it's like, is this a video game? Like, what is going on? Because it just looks so shoddy, and you're like, their knees don't have to always be bent when they're standing. Like, it's human movement and human, in general, I think. So a long way to go. But
I'll say like this. Okay. So when you just talked about like the knees bending, so I don't know why this just randomly came up in my mind, but like, I'll say it, right? So like being in the military, okay? So when you stand at attention, okay, so they tell you that you should bend your knees at a slight angle. It doesn't need to be like a full-on angle, but like just slight enough
where you're slightly, so you don't,
because you don't want to fall. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So when you're, in let's say a movie and you're standing, for multiple hours, depending on what it is, yeah, you do need to slightly bend because, like, at the same time, you don't want to pass out.
I do understand that, but CGI, it's almost like kind of that almost extreme.
Yeah. Right. No. I get that what you're saying. I mean, but like, depending on what they're doing, I mean, they might have to slightly bend their knee or do certain things because they don't want to pass out, because that's part of the issue. And so, when it comes down to, the practical, effects like we've been talking about, it's, you want to try to make it more realistic as best as you can, because I understand with CGI, you can just do whatever the hell you want and it's not a big deal. But like with practical, I mean, especially like with Star Wars, right? So like if they were all standing in a row, so like, let's say the stormtroopers, right? And they're standing right there. Guess what they're doing? They're probably going to bend their knees, and they're not going to like, pretend like it's whatever, but like they're probably,
and it's really one of those things too. I mean, you look at Star Wars and yeah, if you have, you want to have 100,000 stormtroopers,
Right.
you know, in a practical effect world, you would have to hire said 150,000, you know, extras to play stormtroopers, as opposed to digital effects where you might be able to get away with 20 if you even have that many, because the rest of them, guess what? You can just CGI them as many times as you want.
Well, right. And so like, well, we already talked about this, but like, you know how in the original film, when it comes to, I think it was the fifth or sixth one, where they showed the original Anakin, original Darth Vader without the mask on. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah.
Versus like showing them with the new Hayden Christensen, you know, in that practical effect. So what I'm trying to say with that is like they had to basically show you that in a, you know, astral realm that they basically could change from one to another, because that was all CGI. There was no, you can't just like practically affect that
Right.
in that sense. And so even if you tried to practically affect that, you know, even back in the day, it
You
was
get the
hard
effects
enough.
that are equal to Superman.
Well, exactly. No, I agree. And and that's the thing, is it's hard to replicate that, especially with practical effects. So like you had to do CGI because there was no way to physically do that again, because you can't replicate that in my opinion.
I mean, if I was gonna say anything, you know, practical effects versus digital, I think that there's room for both. And
I absolutely agree on that.
I think if you know, and not just, you know, not this whole episode isn't just picking on Marvel, because
No,
I definitely
not.
don't want to do that. But if I had to say anything about Marvel recently, is I do think they might just be overstepping how much CGI they're using.
So I can agree on that. I think what they need to do is kind of balance it out. I think
Now, not everything can be practical. Like Iron Man's suit, you're not practically going to make that.
That's
happen.
all CGI. That's all CGI. I mean, like what I'm saying is more like so let's say Cap. You can bring that. You can definitely make that more practical, because it's not like it's, you know, the nanotechnology that you know. Let's say Iron Man was using, or
you know, in
like
Endgame, the scene where they're walking to, and I don't know what that thing was called, but they have like kind of the white uniforms on.
Oh, it's more like the time jump. I don't know why.
Yeah.
I can't think of what you're talking about, but yeah.
But their uniforms in that scene when they're, I mean, I think the whole time when they're wearing them,
yeah,
that's 100% CGI.
Oh, absolutely.
They're not wearing those.
Well, not even that. I mean, you look at the Hulk. I mean, he's CGI through the whole damn thing.
Well, Hulk I can understand, because obviously
but
you're not going to make like a character that's that big.
No, I understand that. But what I'm saying is like the fact that you have to make the character, you know, CGI, and then you have to make him CGI with that suit on. Like that's the whole thing. And like you can't.
The real question is like you can't make that suit. I mean, granted, they would probably CGI a little bit over it so that it would.
I think with him you can, but I think the others, I think they had to make their suit. I don't think that they actually had
100% of their suits were CGI'd.
Are you sure?
Uh-huh.
I'm surprised, because I would have thought that would not have been CGI.
I mean, Hulk in himself is CGI anyways.
Yes, but I'm talking about the others, though. I thought they would have never been CGI'd.
Nope.
I'm surprised. I'm really surprised. I'm only surprised because like that would have been like the one time that I would have thought that they actually would have made those suits, because they actually looked like they were actually wearing those suits.
Right.
I understand that. If that's the case, then it's just crazy that they didn't.
And I understand like that, you know, the helmets kind of come on and I mean, that so obviously, yes, has to be CGI.
So the helmets, yes, I would understand, but like the actual suits,
the actual suits, yeah.
I then they did a really damn good job on that, because I honestly never would have thought.
And that's digital effects, and that's what makes it great. But I do think, like I said, there's room for both. And like I said, you know, Iron Man suit, like you're not going to do that in practical because it would be too heavy.
So like I said, like when I look at like Captain America, like that is a practical effect that you could physically do, especially with like the, you know, the shield and everything else. Other than that, there's very few. I mean, Thor, you can't really practical effect. I mean, you could maybe do like
His-
the suit, but like other
His
than
suit
that,
is his suit is 100% too.
well, no. But what I'm saying is like you can't do like the thunder. You can't do all that shit that that he was doing. Like I said, like that's all CGI.
I mean that's all CGI. Yeah.
Just like Hulk, and like an Iron Man. But like, I mean, really, I would say Cap and maybe him with his suit. Other than that, you can't. I mean, maybe Black Widow, maybe Hawkeye. But like,
Maybe.
you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
it depends on what you're talking about. So it depends on what you're focusing on at that point. You know what
Well,
I
I
mean?
mean
So,
they CGI characters in pretty much every movie. Touching up skin tones and making them look a certain way.
no, of course.
And that's like every movie that you're getting. I mean, even with like some of the Guardians, they de-aged
well, yeah, no, of course. I mean,
Kurt Russell. I mean, they've
Kurt Russell's old as hell, but yeah, I'm just saying in general. But I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
I mean, it just depends on what you're looking at that point.
right. And makeup can go a long way, which
I mean, that's just
they
general
they
facts.
use makeup and then they kind of CGI over it and they go, oh no, it was legit practical effects.
I mean, you say that, but I mean, look at Kurt Russell, man. I mean, he's old as hell. There's no way around it. But that's just me.
So I think the question remains, which is better? I mean, I say they're both equal in what they do.
I have to agree. I mean, it depends on the movie. It depends on the concept of the movie. I mean, it depends on a lot of things. I mean, if you can do practical effects, I mean, that's great.
Certainly, I think both can be overused.
Yes, I would say CGI can definitely be well overused. I mean, I think if you I think actually what you mentioned already, if you can have kind of like a blend of both,
Right.
if you can have the practical effects depending on what it is, that's great. If you can basically do 50-50, I think it would be great. But I think the problem is it depends on the movie. It depends on the story and it depends on all this other stuff. And so, if you try to make it practical, you're going to notice that more than you are going to be with, I
Right.
mean, CGI.
Unless you're making a movie like Zombievers, and then that's just going to be practical effects.
Right. And so I think I think at the end of the day, I mean, when you look at practical versus CGI, I mean, CGI can be, it's definitely well noticed. I think both of them can be well noticed, but I think if you blended them the right way,
Right.
I think that's when you can.
And if you do CGI, if you do CGI right, and you actually allot the right amount of time on CGI, it can look amazing.
I will say one thing: Star Wars did a really shitty job on Rogue One. So when you look at Princess Leia and you look at what was it, General Tarkin or whatever the hell his name is, that was straight up.
Yeah, that was straight up horrible. Yeah,
that was a terrible example. So what I'm saying is
that was video game CGI right there.
That's what I'm saying. So like if you want to do it right, don't do what they did, because when you look at so for example, like when I'm thinking of CGI, so when you look at Iron Man, when you look at his suit, when you look at his nanotechnology, that's a perfect example of CGI and how it actually enveloped.
I think a more perfect example of that though is Chris Evans being that like really skinny version of Steve Rogers.
Okay. If you're going to talk about like that way far back.
Well, no, because that actor was not Chris Evans. It was a different actor altogether, and they CGI'd Chris Evans' face on this guy.
I mean,
pretty much at the start of that movie.
I understand, but what I'm saying is that when you look at how when he was developed, I mean, I understand that later on that like that's how he became, but when I look at like really, I would say as perfect CGI example is really more Hulk, right? So like being able to like envelop him in that case, especially when you look at him in like Avengers, right? So when you look at him as, Mark Ruffalo being the Hulk and being like, hey, this is the guy, like this is the Hulk, like this is who I want to be in this case, like that's who when I look at CGI, like that's perfect example, like that's gonna be like that's what it is, and so when I look at I would say Steve Rogers in the beginning of that. Yes, I could say the CGI was perfect in that example. And then practical effects. I mean, did he look like that in real life? I don't know. Did he look like that in real life and during that time in 2011? I don't know.
No, because it was
I mean, that was all
that
CGI.
actor was a different actor, so the actor was
but
very, very
what,
skinny.
what I mean is like, you know, when you look at him in 2011, right? So when you look at him like being that, you know, body, physique, and everything else. So did he look like that when he, you know, came out of that chamber, you know, being in that, like that really muscular role and kind of like, you know, being that, you know, Captain America?
I think at that point, that's what he looked like. Yes.
Well, yes, but that's what I'm saying. Like, so like practical effects, that would make sense. CGI effects, you know, the other actor, then that would make more sense.
Right. And there's no way that you're going to practical effect some skinny, scrawny actor who's playing
No.
Steve Rogers and be like, we're going to make a practical effect to make you look like him. No, you're not.
No, absolutely not. No, absolutely not. That's not going to happen.
No, you're not. But I mean, and it's weird. I mean, I was hoping we were going to maybe disagree, but I think we kind of fall in line with
no, I think
each other. Like,
this is the first time that I would say that we actually fall in line because, you know, I think when it comes down to, you know, I would say practical effects and CGI. I mean, it's kind of one of those things that, you know, when we say that, you know, having the blend of, you know, having that CGI and having those, you know, kind of practical moments,
right.
It makes sense because, you know, I don't want always everything to be CGI because that's the kind of like the new modern kind of way of thinking and how we do things in movies.
Yeah.
But like, you know, having those practical effects, I mean, we've been doing that for
I mean, I can only just imagine like what percentage of CGI, you know, Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania was.
Oh,
I had to be at least 98%.
No, practical effects, I would say that was like 100% fucking CGI and like maybe very few scenes where it was CGI. I mean, you know, practical
effects, yeah.
So like, I mean, like Marvel has done a really good job of how they, I would say, depending on what movie you're talking about, like they've done a really good job between practical and, you know, kind of CGI, depending on what it is. I mean, it depends on what movie it is, but I mean, yes, they've used a lot of CGI. That's clearly, you know, depending on what it is. But like they have used CGI. I mean, like the practical effects. I mean, because like you look at, you know, Captain America, you can't just use CGI. I mean, there's just depending on what the character you're looking at. I mean, I feel like that.
I mean, obviously the shield when he's throwing it is.
I mean, that's CGI. Yes. No, but like, I mean, practical effect. I'm just talking about more like the character.
Yeah.
You know, how they portray him and how they do all that. But like, yes, like Hulk. No, he's 100% CGI. There's no, you cannot tell me that's all practical.
And if you ever watch behind the scenes of Mark Ruffalo, and that ridiculous huge
thing. No. I agree. No, but it's the truth. I
mean, it's really silly, and that's how they're acting in the movie. And like, I would love to see outtakes. Of them doing that because,
or especially bloopers at that point.
Seeing Mark Ruffalo in that huge, you know, it's like a black upper body of the Hulk. But he's just wearing it with all the little dots on his, you know, hands and face and everything.
Yeah, it's more like a video game, and like at that point,
and it's supposed to simulate like how big he's supposed to be.
Yeah,
but it's just him wearing this thing.
It doesn't make any sense.
It looks really, really silly, and you have to kind of like, okay, he's the Hulk right now, you know, and like, well, he looks kind of dumb.
I mean, he kind of looks dumb in that suit, but it's fine. No, I understand what you're saying, but I think we're good, man. I
think we've killed this one.
We definitely killed this one. But I will say, guys, you know, we appreciate the hell. I'm not gonna say just in general, the hell out of you guys. I mean, we love the fact that you guys are, you know, trying to like our page, you know, trying to be I would just say just being supportive. I mean, that's really what we're trying to do because at the end of the day, you know, we're trying to be, you know, as genuine as possible. And it's one of those things that, you know, when Matt and I talk, it's hard for us to, I guess the best way to put it is like, we're trying to be genuine as possible. And we're trying to be, you know, as friendly user as possible. I guess if that's the best way you want to put it, but like, you know, we're trying to be as, I guess, sociable. Right. So we're not trying to be introverts. We're trying to be as sociable as we can be. And, you know, we want to, give you guys content that makes you, want to listen to us and do all this stuff. Because again, we're both introverts, man. I mean, I might be more sociable than Matt is in most times, but I mean, at the same time, we're both introverts. I mean, he's just more of an introvert than I am. I'm probably more of like an introvert, extrovert kind of a deal. But I think at the end of the day, when we give you guys content, we just want to make sure that you guys are, listening and being able to, chat with us and, and really at the end of the day, it's more just making sure that you guys can, relate to us because again, we're two dudes, right? We're two dudes. We're normal dudes. We're not like, we're like famous dudes that, talk about, random shit and whatnot. I mean, we're just two dudes that are basically broke.
Dudes in a room.
Two dudes in a room. That's the best way to put it.
Yeah.
But anyways, I will say we love you guys. We appreciate everything that you do. But as always,
Stay geeky.